The rain fell in sheets, drumming on the black umbrellas like a requiem no one had rehearsed. Julian Harper stood at the edge of the open grave, his husband's casket gleaming darkly under the weight of wet roses. He hadn't cried yet, not in front of them, but his silence screamed louder than any sob could. It was supposed to be a quiet life. Julian, a high school history teacher in Rochester, New York, had built a world with Marcus. Coffee-fueled mornings, late-night debates over old war documentaries, and a love that felt like a fortress against the world's sharp edges. But Marcus was gone now, taken by a sudden heart attack at 38, leaving Julian to face a crowd of mourners who didn't know the half of it. They saw the perfect couple, the kind who hosted potlucks and adopted rescue dogs. They didn't see the late-night arguments, the cryptic phone calls Marcus took in the garage, or the way he'd started locking his laptop. Julian hadn't either, not really, until today. The funeral ended, and the crowd drifted away, their whispers fading into the rain. Julian stayed, rooted to the muddy ground, the white rose in his hand wilting. He felt a presence beside him, familiar yet distant. Ezra Chun, Marcus's best friend and their neighbor, stood there, his artist hands shoved deep into his coat pockets. Ezra's brown eyes, usually bright with mischief, were heavy with something unspoken. "You don't have to go through this alone," he said softly, his voice nearly lost in the storm. Julian didn't respond. He couldn't. The weight of Marcus's absence was a blade, and Ezra's kindness only twisted it deeper. They'd been close once, the three of them, Julian, Marcus, and Ezra, sharing late-night drinks and dreams of a bigger life. But something had shifted in the last year, a subtle fracture Julian couldn't name. Now, standing by the grave, he wondered if Ezra knew more than he let on. Back at the house, the air smelled of lilies and regret. Julian moved through the living room, ignoring the casseroles and sympathy cards piling up on the counter. He needed answers, not condolences. Marcus's laptop sat on the oak desk, a sleek, silver thing that had always felt like a stranger in their home. Julian hesitated, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Marcus had been obsessive about his privacy lately, but grief made Julian reckless. He typed in the password, "Our first kiss," and the screen flickered to life. A banking app was already open, one Julian didn't recognize. The account name was unfamiliar, too, Aurora Holdings. The balance made his breath catch, $7,032,416.87. His knees buckled, and he gripped the desk to steady himself. Marcus, the man who'd argued over $50 grocery bills, had a secret account with $7 million, and Julian had no idea where it came from. He scrolled through the transaction history, each entry a punch to the gut. Transfers from offshore accounts, deposits in the tens of thousands, all dated within the last 2 years. There were payments to names he didn't know, V. Salazar, K. Nguyen, and one recurring withdrawal labeled simply E.C. Ezra Chun. Julian's heart thudded. Was Ezra involved? Had Marcus been hiding more than money? The doorbell rang, sharp and jarring. Julian slammed the laptop shut, his pulse racing. Through the peephole, he saw Ezra, rain-soaked and holding a bottle of wine. "I thought you might need company," Ezra called through the door, his voice warm but tentative. Julian opened the door, his face a mask. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Ezra's brow furrowed. "Tell you what." Julian didn't answer. He stepped aside, letting Ezra in, but the room felt smaller now, the air thick with suspicion. The money, the secrets, the initials, it was all a puzzle, and Julian was determined to solve it, even if it broke him. He poured 2 glasses of wine, his hand steady despite the storm inside him. Ezra sat across from him, oblivious to the weight of Julian's gaze. "Marcus was my best friend," Ezra said, his voice cracking. "But he wasn't perfect. You know that." Julian nodded, sipping the wine to hide his trembling lips. He didn't know, not really, but he was about to find out. The wine tasted bitter, or maybe that was just Julian's mood. He watched Ezra swirl his glass, the artist's long fingers catching the dim light of the living room. Every gesture felt like a clue, every word a potential lie. Julian's mind churned with questions. Why had Marcus hidden the money? What did Ezra know? And why did those initials, EC, burn in his chest like a brand? I keep thinking about that trip to Maine, Ezra said, breaking the silence. The three of us, that summer. Marcus was so alive then. His voice was soft, nostalgic, but Julian's grip on his glass tightened. That trip had been 3 years ago, before the distance crept into their marriage, before Marcus started disappearing into late-night work sessions. Julian had chalked it up to stress. Marcus's job as a financial consultant was demanding, but now he wondered what else he'd missed. Yeah, Julian managed his voice flat. He was different then. He wanted to confront Ezra, to demand answers about the money, but something held him back. Fear, maybe, or the nagging hope that there was an innocent explanation. Instead, he steered the conversation elsewhere. You were at his office a lot lately. Helping with a project? Ezra's eyes flickered, just for a moment. Not really. Just keeping him company. He seemed stressed. He paused, then added, you know how he got when he was working on something big? Julian nodded, but his mind was racing. Marcus's office. That was the next place to look. If there were answers, they'd be there, in the files or emails Marcus guarded so fiercely. He stood abruptly, startling Ezra. I need to check something. You can stay if you want. Ezra frowned, but didn't argue. I'll be here, he said, his tone gentle but laced with something Julian couldn't place. Concern, or maybe guilt. The drive to Marcus's office in downtown Rochester was a blur of rain and red lights. The small, glass-walled space was tucked into a strip mall, unassuming but tidy, with Marcus's name still on the door. Marcus Harper, financial consultant. Julian used the spare key, his hand shaking as he unlocked the door. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and paper, a ghost of Marcus's presence. He started with the desk drawers, finding nothing but pens, receipts, and a half-empty pack of gum. The computer was password-protected, but Julian knew Marcus's habits. He tried Our First Kiss again, and it worked. The screen lit up, revealing a desktop cluttered with folders. One caught his eye, Aurora. His heart skipped. He clicked it open, revealing spreadsheets, emails, and scanned documents. Most were in code, strings of numbers and abbreviations, but one email stood out, sent 3 months ago from an anonymous address. Keep the funds moving. VS is watching. Don't tell Jay. Julian. His stomach twisted. Marcus had been hiding this from him deliberately. He dug deeper, finding a ledger with transactions matching the bank account. Payments to EC appeared monthly, $5,000 each time. Julian's breath hitched. Ezra. What was he part of? His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his spiral. A text from Ezra. You okay? I'm worried. Julian stared at the screen, his thumb hovering over the reply button. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know who to trust. Back at home, Ezra was still on the couch, the wine bottle nearly empty. Find what you needed? He asked, his voice casual but his eyes sharp. Julian hesitated. Not yet. He sat down, closer this time, studying Ezra's face. You and Marcus were close. Did he ever tell you about money? Big money. Ezra's expression didn't change, but his fingers tightened around his glass. He mentioned investments sometimes. What? Julian leaned forward, his voice low. I found something. An account. Medial. And your name was in it. For a moment, Ezra was still, his face unreadable. Then he laughed, short and nervous. My name? Julian, come on. You think I'm hiding something? I don't know what to think, Julian said, his voice breaking. But I'm going to find out. Ezra's laugh hung in the air, brittle and unconvincing. Julian's accusation had shifted something between them, like a crack spreading through glass. The living room, once a haven of warmth, felt like a stage for a play neither of them had rehearsed. You don't believe me, Ezra said, his voice quieter now, almost hurt. He set his glass down and leaned forward elbows on his knees. Julian, I'd never lie to you. Not about Marcus. Not about anything. Then explain the payments. Julian snapped, his patience fraying. $5,000 a month, Ezra. To you. From an account I didn't even know existed. Ezra's eyes widened, genuine shock flickering across his face. Or was it an act? Julian couldn't tell anymore. I don't know anything about payments, Ezra said, his voice steady but strained. Marcus helped me out sometimes, studio rent, supplies, but nothing like that. You've got to believe me. Julian wanted to. God, he wanted to. Ezra had been their rock, the one who'd painted their wedding portrait, who'd stayed up with them through laughter and tears. But the numbers didn't lie, and Marcus had. Julian stood, pacing the room, his mind a tangle of grief and suspicion. I need to know the truth, he said, more to himself than to Ezra. I need to know who he was. Ezra stood too, stepping closer. He was your husband. He loved you. Whatever this is, it's not what you think. Then what is it? Julian's voice cracked, raw with desperation. He was drowning in questions, and Ezra's presence, his warmth, his familiarity, was both a lifeline and a weight. I don't know, Ezra admitted, his hands raised in surrender. But let me help you find out. Please. Julian stared at him, torn. He wanted to trust Ezra, to lean into the comfort of their shared history. But the ledger, the emails, the secrets, they were a wall between them. Fine, he said finally. But if you're lying to me, Ezra, I'll never forgive you. They spent the next hour combing through Marcus's office files remotely, using the laptop's cloud access. Ezra sat close, his shoulder brushing Julian's, but the intimacy felt fragile, like it could shatter with one wrong word. They found more references to Aurora Holdings, including a contract signed by Marcus and someone named Valentina Salazar. The name matched the VS from the email. The contract was vague, mentioning consulting services for a tech startup, but the numbers were staggering, millions funneled through shell companies. Who's Valentina? Julian asked, his voice tight. Ezra shook his head. Never heard of her. But Marcus was working with a lot of clients. Maybe she's one of them. Julian's gut told him it was more than that. He Googled Valentina Salazar, finding a LinkedIn profile for a venture capitalist in San Francisco. Her photo showed a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s, her bio listing investments in tech and biotech firms. Nothing explicitly tied her to Marcus, but the connection was there, buried in the numbers. By midnight, exhaustion hit. Ezra offered to stay the night, citing the rain and his worry for Julian. Against his better judgment, Julian agreed. They slept in separate rooms. Ezra on the couch, Julian in the bed he'd share with Marcus. But sleep didn't come. Julian lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the secret account pressing down on him. $7 million. A stranger's name, Ezra's initials, and Marcus, gone, unable to explain any of it. In the morning, Julian found Ezra in the kitchen, brewing coffee. The normalcy of it stung. We need to find Valentina, Julian said, no preamble. She knows something. Ezra nodded, his expression unreadable. I'll go with you, wherever this leads. Julian didn't know if it was loyalty or something else, but he agreed. They were in this together, for now. The road to San Francisco was a gamble, but Julian had nothing left to lose. He and Ezra booked the earliest flight, the hum of the plane doing little to calm Julian's nerves. Ezra sat beside him, sketching in a worn notebook, his pencil scratching out a portrait of Marcus. The sight twisted something in Julian's chest. Grief, yes, but also a flicker of something warmer, something he hadn't felt in years. You're good at that, Julian said, nodding at the sketch. Marcus's face was coming to life, all sharp jawlines and kind eyes. It hurt to look at. Ezra glanced up, a small smile breaking through. He was easy to draw, always so present. He paused, then added, You both were. Julian turned away, staring out the window at the clouds. He didn't want to talk about the past, not when the present was a minefield. They landed in San Francisco by noon. the city's fog wrapping them in a chilly embrace. Valentina Salazar's office was in a sleek downtown high-rise, all glass and steel. Julian had emailed her, claiming to be a colleague of Marcus's, and she'd agreed to meet. He didn't mention the money. Not yet. Valentina was exactly as her photo suggested. Polished, confident, with a handshake like a vice. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, her voice smooth but professional. Marcus was a unique talent. Julian sat across from her, Ezra at his side. "What kind of talent?" he asked, keeping his tone neutral. Valentina leaned back, her eyes narrowing slightly. "He consulted for us on a few projects. Financial structuring, mostly. He had a knack for finding creative solutions. Creative enough to move $7 million through Aurora Holdings?" Julian's voice was steady, but his heart pounded. Her smile faltered just for a second. "I'm not sure what you mean. Aurora was one of our investment vehicles, but I need to check the specifics." Ezra shifted beside him, his knee brushing Julian's under the table. A warning or reassurance? Julian couldn't tell. "Check the specifics," Julian said, his voice harder now. "Because I found payments to you, to someone named Kay, Gwen, and to Ezra here. I want to know why." Valentina's composure held, but her fingers tapped the desk. A tell. "I can assure you, everything was above board. Marcus was managing sensitive investments. If there were payments, they were for services rendered." "Services like what?" Ezra cut in, his voice sharp. Julian glanced at him, surprised. Was Ezra playing a role, or was he as in the dark as he claimed? Valentina stood, smoothing her blazer. "I'll need to review our records. Can we reconvene tomorrow?" Julian wanted to push, but her tone left no room. They left the office, the city's hum swallowing their silence. Outside, Ezra grabbed Julian's arm. "She's hiding something. I could see it." Julian pulled away, his frustration boiling over. "And what about you, Ezra? Your name was in that ledger. Stop acting like you're just along for the ride." Ezra's face crumpled, but he didn't back down. "I told you, I don't know about any payments. But I'm here, Julian. I'm trying to help." Julian wanted to believe him, but trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. They checked into a hotel, the tension between them thick. That night, Julian couldn't sleep. He opened Marcus's laptop again, digging through emails. One, buried in a folder labeled personal, stopped him cold. It was from Marcus to Ezra, dated a month before his death. "I can't keep this from Julian much longer. If anything happens, tell him the truth." Julian's hands shook as he read it again. The truth. What was it? And why hadn't Ezra said anything? The hotel room was too quiet, the kind of silence that amplifies doubt. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, Marcus's laptop glowing in the dark. The email to Ezra was a knife in his chest. If anything happens, tell him the truth. He wanted to storm into Ezra's room, demand answers, but his body wouldn't move. Grief and betrayal were a paralyzing mix. At dawn, he knocked on Ezra's door. Ezra answered, bleary-eyed, his hair a mess. "You okay?" he asked, concern softening his features. Julian held up the laptop. "What's the truth, Ezra? Marcus told you to tell me. So do it." Ezra's face paled. He stepped back, letting Julian in. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, but his voice wavered. "Don't lie to me." Julian's shout echoed in the small room. He thrust the laptop at Ezra, the email open. "He wrote this to you, a month before he died. What was he hiding?" Ezra read the email, his hands trembling. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "Julian, I swear, I don't know what he meant. He never told me anything specific, just that he was in over his head. He said he was protecting you." "Protecting me from what?" Julian's voice broke, raw with pain. $7 million? Some shady deal with Valentina? "You..." Ezra flinched, but he didn't look away. "Not me. Never me. Marcus loved you, Julian. Whatever this was, it wasn't about us." "Then what was it?" Julian sank onto the bed, his anger giving way to exhaustion. "I thought I knew him. I thought we had no secrets." Ezra sat beside him, close but not touching. "He was scared," he said softly. "The last few months, he was different, distracted. He'd call me late, rambling about work, about risks. I thought it was just stress. Julian looked at him, searching for a lie. He found none, only the same grief he felt. We're going back to Valentina, he said finally, and we're not leaving until she talks. Their second meeting with Valentina was colder. She'd prepared, her answers polished but evasive. The funds were part of a venture capital deal, she said, sliding a folder across her desk. Marcus was our intermediary. Everything was legal. Julian opened the folder, scanning the documents. They were dense, filled with jargon, but one name stood out. Penguin. Who's this? He asked, pointing. Valentina hesitated. A partner. They handled logistics. Logistics for what? Ezra pressed, his voice sharp. She sighed, leaning back. A biotech startup. Marcus was moving funds to secure patents. It was sensitive. He insisted on discretion. Julian's mind raced. Biotech. Patents. $7 million. It didn't add up. Marcus had never mentioned biotech, and his clients were usually small businesses, not high-stakes startups. I want to meet in Gwen, Julian said. Valentina's smile was tight. That's not possible. They're overseas. Then get them on a call, Julian snapped. Or I go to the police with this. Her eyes flickered with something, fear maybe. I'll arrange it, she said. Give me a day. Back at the hotel, Julian and Ezra were silent, the weight of their discoveries pressing down. Julian couldn't shake the feeling that they were close to something dangerous. That night, Ezra reached for his hand, a tentative gesture. We'll figure this out, he said. Together. Julian pulled away, but not before their fingers brushed, sending a jolt through him. He didn't want to feel this. Not now, not with Ezra. But the warmth lingered, a dangerous spark in the dark. The call with Kay. Gwen was a dead end. Valentina arranged it, but the voice on the other end was vague, claiming to be a logistics coordinator in Singapore. They confirmed Marcus's role, but offered no details, citing confidentiality. Julian hung up, his frustration boiling over. They're stonewalling us, he told Ezra, pacing the hotel room. This isn't just about money. It's bigger. Ezra nodded, his sketchbook open to a new drawing, this time of Julian. The likeness was uncanny, capturing the exhaustion in his eyes, the set of his jaw. You're not giving up, Ezra said, not a question, but a statement. So what's next? Julian didn't have an answer. He felt like he was chasing shadows, each clue leading to more questions. But one thing was clear, Valentina was the key. She knew more than she was saying, and Julian was done playing nice. They returned to her office unannounced, catching her off guard. Her assistant tried to stop them, but Julian pushed past, Ezra close behind. Valentina was on a call, her face tightening when she saw them. This is inappropriate, she said, hanging up. Then tell me the truth, Julian said, his voice low and dangerous. What was Marcus doing? Why was he hiding millions? And don't give me that biotech crap. Valentina's composure cracked. She glanced at Ezra, then back at Julian. You don't understand what you're asking. This is bigger than Marcus. Bigger than you. Then explain it, Ezra said, stepping forward. Because we're not leaving until you do. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Fine, but not here. Meet me tonight. There's a warehouse in Oakland. I'll send the address. The warehouse was a hulking, rusted structure by the docks, the kind of place that screamed trouble. Julian's gut churned, but he couldn't turn back. Ezra insisted on coming, his presence both a comfort and a complication. The air between them was charged, their earlier touch lingering like a ghost. Valentina was waiting inside, alone, her heels echoing on the concrete. Marcus was moving money for a client, she said without preamble. A dangerous one. He got in too deep, and when he tried to pull out, they threatened him. Who? Julian demanded. She hesitated. A syndicate. They used the biotech front to launder money. Marcus was their middleman. Julian's world tilted. His husband, the man who'd kissed him goodnight for 10 years, was laundering money for criminals. And the payments to Ezra, he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Valentina glanced at Ezra, who looked as stunned as Julian felt. They weren't to him, she said. EC was a code. Emergency contact. It was me. Julian's knees weakened. Ezra grabbed his arm, steadying him. Why didn't he tell me? Julian asked, his voice breaking. Because he loved you, Valentina said. He wanted you safe. The revelation hit like a tidal wave. Marcus had been protecting him, but at what cost? Julian looked at Ezra, whose eyes were filled with the same pain, the same love. They were bound by Marcus's secrets, and now, by something more. The warehouse's shadows seemed to close in as Valentina's words sank in. Marcus, tangled in a web of crime to protect Julian. $7 million, a fortune built on lies. Julian's grief twisted into something sharper. Anger, yes, but also a fierce need to make things right. What now? Ezra asked, his voice steady despite the chaos. He hadn't let go of Julian's arm, and the warmth of his touch grounded Julian, tethering him to the present. Valentina's eyes darted to the warehouse doors, nervous. The syndicate doesn't know Marcus is dead. They'll come for the money. If you want out, transfer it back and walk away. And if I don't, Julian asked. Her face hardened. They'll find you. Both of you. Julian's mind raced. He could run, disappear with Ezra and the money, but that wasn't who he was. Marcus had made choices, bad ones, but Julian wouldn't let his legacy be fear. I'm not running, he said. I'm going to the authorities. Valentina's eyes widened. You'll destroy everything Marcus worked for. He destroyed it himself, Julian snapped. But I can still fix it. Ezra squeezed his arm. I'm with you, he said, and this time, Julian didn't pull away. They left the warehouse, the night air cold against their skin. Back at the hotel, Julian contacted a lawyer friend, laying out everything. The account, the syndicate, Valentina's confession. The lawyer promised to connect them with the FBI, but warned it would take time. Time it might not have. That night, Julian and Ezra sat on the hotel balcony, the city sprawling below. I'm sorry, Ezra said, his voice soft. For not knowing. For not pushing Marcus harder. Julian shook his head. You couldn't have known. He didn't want us to. He paused, then added, I'm glad you're here. Ezra's smile was small, fragile. I've always been here, Julian, even when you didn't see me. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Julian felt it then. The spark he'd buried, the pull he'd ignored for years. Ezra had been their friend, their confidant, but there was more. Always had been. Marcus had seen it, maybe even encouraged it in his own way. Julian reached for Ezra's hand, their fingers intertwining. I see you now, he said. The FBI took over the next day. The money was frozen, Valentina was questioned, and the syndicate's web began to unravel. Julian and Ezra returned to Rochester, the weight of Marcus's secrets still heavy but shared. They stood by the grave again, the rain gone, the sky clear. Marcus would have wanted this, Ezra said, tossing a white rose onto the grave. You're doing the right thing. Julian nodded, tears falling freely now. He wants us to live, too. They walked away together, hands brushing, a new beginning born from loss. The money was gone, the secrets exposed, but Julian had something better, truth and Ezra. And that was enough.